The kitchen always smelled like comfort. Especially in the evening, when the soft glow of the lampshade spilled over the wooden table, where we usually left traces of our day, scattered newspapers, dinner leftovers, breadcrumbs. Tonight was just like any other, calm and predictable, like all the ones before. I, Christopher, came home from work exhausted, drained like a squeezed lemon. I poured myself a whiskey, my evening ritual, my way of washing off the fatigue of the day. Sophia was there too, in the kitchen, yet somehow in another dimension. She stood by the window, her back to me, as if searching for something in the twilight that was more important than my presence. Her voice was quiet, muffled, as if she were hiding words from me, but the kitchen was never good at keeping secrets. Through the silence, snippets of phrases slipped through, at first indistinct, like the whisper of the wind outside. And then came the words that cut through the evening serenity like a knife through butter. "You know," she said to someone on the other end of the line, "I agreed to Christopher. Well, he was my last resort." Last resort. The words stabbed into my brain like shards of glass. At first, just numbness. I froze, the glass of amber liquid suspended in my hand, never reaching my lips. My heart skipped a beat, then started pounding like mad. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Was she talking about me? About us? Then came the cold. Not just cold, but ice water flooding my veins, freezing me from the inside out. Betrayal. Yes, that's what it was. Poisonous, sticky, spreading through my body, paralyzing my will, polluting my thoughts. Last resort. Me, her last. Me, the one who gave her my whole heart, who built a life with her. Turns out I was just the backup plan. The feeling of being deceived was suffocating. Unwanted. That's what I felt. As if everything I believed was love had been a lie, a cheap imitation. My love, devalued, discarded like trash among her choices. My mind desperately tried to find an excuse. Maybe I misheard. Maybe there was another context. Maybe she was joking. But the tone, calm, indifferent, that's what cut the deepest. Not anger, not frustration, indifference. As if she were talking about the weather, not about the man she shared a bed, a life, and dreams with. My thoughts were spiraling. I wanted to step forward, to explode, to demand an explanation, to tear apart this fake silence of the kitchen with a scream. But fear. The fear of hearing confirmation. The fear that these words, overheard by accident, weren't a mistake, but the truth I had been too blind to see. I stood there, paralyzed between the urge to act and the terror of knowing. The kitchen still smelled of comfort, but for me, that comfort had just turned into a trap. A coincidence. That's what it was. A mere accident that had opened the door to another version of our reality, where beneath the facade of our idol, a cold, cruel truth had been hiding all along. And I stood at the threshold of this new, shattering knowledge, not knowing if I had the courage to take the next step. The air in the living room seemed to thicken, filled with invisible needles of tension, ready to pierce any word, any movement. Yesterday, this place had been peaceful, the soft glow of the fireplace reflected on the glossy surface of the coffee table. But now it felt like a battlefield, where two people, once close, now stood as strangers. The silence between us was heavy, oppressive, like a concrete slab, overflowing with unspoken accusations, resentment, disappointment. I looked at Sophia, trying to find even a shadow of familiarity in her face, but all I saw was a mask of tension, hiding emotions unknown to me. Finally, I broke the silence, my voice measured, almost too calm for the storm raging inside me. "Sophia," I began, feeling how each word took immense effort. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I heard your conversation." She flinched as if struck and lifted her gaze to meet mine, at first filled with fear, then irritation. "You were eavesdropping?" she spat, her voice carrying a note of offense, as if I, not she, was the guilty one in this situation. "That's not the point, Sophia," I replied, trying to keep my composure, though inside, everything was boiling. The point is that I heard. Agreed to Christopher. Last resort. What does that mean? She averted her gaze, bit her lip. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but the tears never came. Christopher, you have to understand. It was just something I said in the heat of the moment. I didn't mean it. She began, her voice trembling, but her eyes held no sincerity, only a carefully played role of an innocent victim. In the heat of the moment? Sophia, we're talking about our lives, our marriage. Things like that don't just slip out in the heat of the moment. My voice grew sharper, restrained anger breaking free. I stepped closer, looking straight into her eyes, trying to break through the armor of her lies. Tell me the truth, Sophia. Just once, be honest with me. She remained silent, head lowered, and that silence was worse than any words. Suddenly, memories surfaced, like frames from an old film. Our first meeting, her shy smile, hesitant touches. Had it all been an act? Had I deceived myself, seeing something that was never there? I remembered our wedding night, the glow in her eyes, the vows of love. Fake. Had it all been fake? All right, she finally spoke, lifting her gaze to me, heavy with something unreadable. Maybe I'm not sure. Not sure about what, Sophia? About me. About us. About our marriage. I fired question after question, desperate to extract even a drop of truth from this well of lies. About everything, Christopher. I don't know what I want. I'm confused. Her voice cracked into a scream, but there was no despair in it, only irritation, as if I were the one to blame for her uncertainty. You agreed to me, Sophia. I was your last resort. Is that it? I repeated those words like a mantra, trying to grasp their full meaning. She looked away again, silent, and then, in a whisper, almost too soft to hear, she said, Maybe, yes. The words hit like a gunshot at point-blank range. The flickering hope inside me extinguished completely, dissolving like smoke. The disappointment that had been building up all evening solidified into a bitter, searing anger. I looked at the woman standing before me and saw a stranger, the one I had loved, trusted, who had turned out to be a master illusionist, deceiving me all along. The decision didn't come immediately, but with every word she spoke, with every evasive glance, it became more inevitable, ripening like fruit ready to fall. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't be someone's last resort, someone they had simply settled for. I deserved more. I deserved to be someone's first choice. And in that moment, despite the pain and disappointment, a strange sense of resolve took root within me. A clarity, a certainty, as if I had finally found my way out of this labyrinth of lies and pretense. All right, Sophia, I said, my voice firm, steady, without a trace of hesitation. I think we should part ways. The decision to divorce came down like a verdict, yet paradoxically, it brought with it a strange sense of relief. It was as if a heavy burden I had carried on my shoulders for so long had finally been lifted, leaving behind only a dull ache and emptiness. I tried to fill that void by throwing myself headfirst into work, drowning in a whirlwind of urgent tasks and endless meetings. In the evenings, to avoid being alone with my thoughts, I called friends, dragging them out for pointless hangouts at bars where the noise and bustle of the crowd somehow muffled the quiet whisper of despair in my soul. On weekends, I even tried a new hobby, rock climbing. The physical exhaustion, the muscle pain, the adrenaline rush, it all distracted me for a while from thoughts of Sophia, her betrayal, and the shattered love we once had. I made desperate attempts to appear as though I was moving on, as if none of it affected me, as if I had already turned the page and was ready for new achievements. But deep inside, the wound wasn't healing. It was bleeding, reminding me of itself every moment, every day. One day, while bumping into an old friend, Steve, at a corner cafe, I agreed to a cup of coffee, hoping for a light, casual conversation that might slightly dispel my melancholy. The cafe was cozy, with soft, muted lighting, the aroma of fresh pastries, and unobtrusive jazz flowing from the speakers. The atmosphere was relaxing, But not for me. I sat there, mechanically stirring sugar into my coffee, listening to Steve's stories about his new job, his kids, his vacation, trying to keep up the conversation, but my mind was far away, trapped in my own turmoil. And then, like a bolt from the blue, Steve casually dropped a sentence, as if in passing. "By the way, you know Sophia's seeing someone, right?" I froze. The coffee spoon slipped from my hand, nearly shattering the cup. "What? With who?" I croaked, feeling the blood drain from my face. Steve raised his eyebrows in surprise, as if he didn't understand my reaction. "Well, with George, I think. That same George she always mentioned. You remember, even before your wedding." The world around me blurred, the sounds of the cafe faded, and only one phrase echoed in my head like a funeral bell. "With George. That same George." George. That same George Sophia had spoken of with such warmth in her voice, such a sparkle in her eyes, back when we had just started dating. George, whom I had always subconsciously seen as a rival, even though Sophia assured me they were just friends. George, who now, after our breakup, had taken my place in her life. The resentment I had felt before seemed like child's play compared to the searing pain of betrayal that now pierced through me. Betrayal. That word spun in my head, tearing my consciousness to shreds. I wasn't just the last option. I had been a temporary stop, a convenient waypoint on her path to her true love. That evening, unable to hold back, I dialed Sophia's number. She answered immediately, her voice calm, even cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Sophia, is it true?" I asked without preamble, trying to steady the trembling in my voice. "What's true, Christopher?" came her playful reply. "Are you seeing George?" There was a pause, then a quiet, indifferent, "Yes, I am." "So what? So what? Do you realize what you're doing? You just ended our marriage, and already with him." "Christopher, don't be dramatic." Her voice turned cold, sharp. "Life goes on. And yes, I'm seeing George, and, it feels right." Feels right. Those words hit me like a slap. For her, right was being with him, while being with me had been a compromise, the last option. I felt crushed, destroyed, obliterated. My attempts to move on crumbled to dust, and the pain returned with a new, even greater force, filling my entire world, leaving no room for anything but the bitter realization of my own worthlessness and the depth of her betrayal. Time stretched slowly, like thick molasses, filling the emptiness after the breakup with monotonous days, weeks, and months. It seemed like I was beginning to come to my senses. The pain had dulled, the sharp edges of disappointment had smoothed out, turning into a dull, barely perceptible sorrow. I had learned to live alone, to find joy in simple things, in work, in conversations with friends, in new hobbies. Sophia gradually faded into the background, becoming a blurry memory, a page of a book that had been turned. I had almost stopped thinking about her, almost forgotten that evening conversation that had shattered my life. But then, one evening, when the night had already fallen outside, and I was sitting in my chair with a book, the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, breaking the silence of my solitude. I flinched, raising my head in surprise, and went to open the door, expecting no one. She was standing on the doorstep. Sophia. Not the confident, cold woman who had claimed her right to another life, but someone entirely different, a broken doll, gaunt, exhausted, her eyes filled with tears and remorse. Her face had grown thinner, dark shadows lay beneath her eyes, and the once radiant smile had vanished, leaving only a bitter trace of suffering. She looked as if the weight of the world had fallen upon her. I stood in silence, studying her, trying to understand what had brought her here after so many months of silence. She was the first to break the silence, her voice trembling like an autumn leaf in the wind. "Christopher. I need to talk to you." I stepped aside, letting her in, and we walked into the living room, where warmth and comfort had once reigned. Now only a distant shadow of past happiness remained. She sat on the edge of the couch, like a stranger, awkwardly clasping her hands in her lap. I sat across from her, waiting for her to speak, watching her emotional turmoil from a distance, with the calm detachment of an audience member in a theater. Tears streamed down her face, thin rivulets glistening on her hollowed cheeks. "Christopher," she said between sobs. Forgive me for everything. I was such a fool. So arrogant. I ruined everything." She told me about George, about their relationship that had turned out to be nothing more than a fleeting illusion, about his betrayal, about the pain and disappointment she now felt. Fully, completely. Her words poured out in a torrent, filled with regret, sorrow, and desperation. "I thought I had found my happiness," she wept. "But it turns out I lost everything. I lost you, Christopher. And only now do I understand what I lost. I finally see who you were. Who you are." She lifted her tear-streaked eyes to me, silently pleading for forgiveness, for a second chance, for a return to a past that could never be restored. "Please, Christopher," she whispered. "Give me another chance. I promise, I'll make things right. I'll be different." I listened in silence, not interrupting, watching her emotional storm unfold, and deep inside, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, satisfaction. Karma, which I had once thought of with bitter irony, had done its work. Sophia had paid for her recklessness, for her betrayal, for the words that had cut so deeply. On the other hand, a faint sadness. I no longer saw the confident woman who had broken my heart, but a remorseful, tormented soul, suffering and in need of help. But despite everything, my decision remained firm. The wound she had inflicted was too deep to heal. The trust she had shattered could never be restored. I stepped closer, gently took her hands in mine, and looked straight into her eyes. Calmly, steadily. "Sophia," I said, "I'm sorry that you're hurting. I truly feel for you. But, no. There won't be a second chance. I can't go back. I've changed. I've realized my worth. And I know that I deserve more. I deserve to be someone's first choice, Sophia. Not their last. Their first." The last spark of hope faded from her eyes, replaced by bitter despair. The cold walls of the courtroom pressed in from all sides, like massive stone slabs, creating an atmosphere of official indifference and inevitability. The formal proceedings moved slowly, monotonously, like a worn-out record, extinguishing any hope for emotion or sympathy. Indifferent faces surrounded us: lawyers, court clerks, random spectators, all merely background figures in this spectacle of divorce, where the main actors were Sophia and me, two former lovers who had turned into enemies. Sophia sat beside me, tense as a stretched wire, making one last desperate attempt to change the course of events. Her pleading gaze was fixed on the judge, an elderly man with a stern, impenetrable expression, who listened to her appeal with a look of detached disinterest. She spoke quickly, incoherently, trying to convince him that the divorce was a mistake, that she had realized everything, that she was ready to fix it all, that she still loved me. Lies. All of it was lies. A pathetic attempt to save a marriage she herself had destroyed. I listened in silence, feeling nothing but exhaustion and the overwhelming desire to end this farce as quickly as possible. The courtroom became the final symbol of her loss, the last Rubicon she had failed to cross. The judge listened carefully, but there was no trace of sympathy in his eyes. A brief consultation with the clerk, a few formal phrases, and the verdict was delivered, clear and final. "The appeal is denied. The divorce is granted." Sophia turned pale as a sheet, letting out a barely audible gasp, as if in physical pain. But this was only the beginning of her downfall. Then came the matter of alimony. She demanded it, insisting on her financial dependence, grasping at any chance to soften the blow. But once again, she was met with failure. My lawyer, with a cold smile, reminded the court of her previous written waiver of any financial claims. The judge, after reviewing the documents, once again denied her, this time, the alimony request. The final blow. The last nail in the coffin. And then, in a fit of desperation, in one final hopeless attempt to salvage something, Sophia dropped her bomb. I'm pregnant," she cried out, and the silence in the courtroom became even heavier, like the stillness before a storm. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. But I remained silent, looking at Sophia with detachment, as if I were watching a stranger's play. Pregnant. With George's child, of course. The baby that was supposed to symbolize her new happiness had become nothing more than another testament to her complete downfall, final proof of her loneliness and despair. The judge, frowning, suggested discussing this matter later, in private, but the truth was already clear. The divorce was final. She had lost. I stepped out of the courthouse, inhaling the crisp air, feeling a strange sense of relief. Not joy, not gloating, just relief. As if a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. Behind me were the cold walls of the courtroom, the formal procedures, the indifferent faces, and most importantly, Sophia, in ruins, broken, destroyed by her own mistakes. I glanced back at the towering building, a symbol of justice and the inescapability of fate, and murmured to myself with a faint, ironic smile, "Karma really is a bitch." There was no anger in those words, only a bitter conclusion, the exhaustion of lived emotions, and the realization that the story of our relationship was well and truly over. Over forever.